Welcome to St. Clair Bass Fishing Report. Let's see what we can see. Welcome to the first installment of the St. Clair Bass Fishing Report. The plan is to do these every Friday. Hopefully we'll get it out a little sooner every week than we did this week, but at least through September anyway, when it's time for me to go camping and go on vacation. So we'll be doing these fishing reports. And this week we have a report from in the field from Dan Kimmel. Dan Kimmel's GreatLakesBass.com is his website, and you can see him post all the time on Facebook, all of his trips. It seems like he's out there quite a bit in the field. This week, he did visit Lake St. Clair on Monday. Now, on Monday, he fished the mile roads and then a little more. And he ended up getting 3 walleye at Memorial Park. He described the water conditions as muddy, which is different than stained. The muddy is bad. And Dan was out fishing in east winds. I actually mentioned to him, I said, "You sure you want to go?" Because east winds at times he said it came and went, but the east winds were pretty brisk, and that's going to bring in a lot of not the best water anyway. We want darker water this time of year, but not muddy if you can help it. But anyway, the walleye seemed to like it. He got 3 of them at the Memorial Park. And I did make it down to Gawker Point, and he ended up getting a lot of hits down there, a lot of bites. He's using a tube, ended up with this nice 3+ pound smallie, and he also got a sheephead too for his troubles. But he did get a lot of hits and misses on a tube, so there are probably a lot more bass there than, and he thought they might have been walleye bites too, but there were probably a lot more bass there than was indicated. It was a tough day. East winds, generally speaking, are difficult. The bite is difficult during the east wind. So he clocked water temp at 51 degrees. You're going to hear that number again throughout the report here. And also, when he launched at the Clinton River cutoff, there was a giant tree blocking a lot of the spots there at the Clinton River cutoff. That's the one that's south of Metro Beach. I think he told me when he came back, somebody had actually moved the tree a little bit and moved it a little bit out of the way and made it a little bit better for everybody. So it was kind of uncomfortable at the launch for a while until that tree got moved. Thank you, Dan. Now, myself and a friend, we went out on Thursday, which was the last day of April, April 30th. It's always nice to get out in March and April. I really encourage that. Saw a few more bass boats out there than usual, which, for a weekday. And so that's good. People are making good use of the body of water and getting out earlier. The fishing's been great, and you don't have to wait for it to warm up. Those bass, smallies in particular, even when you hook them, they don't know that they're cold. They fight just as hard now as they do when everything warms up. But anyway, we made a trip out on Thursday. And it wasn't a long trip, but we ended up working from Ford's Cove all the way down to Windmill Point. That was the plan anyway. We wanted to take a look at some of that water and mostly struck out on a lot of the spots that we fished along the way. Now, I was throwing a blade bait, which I like a blade bait below 50-degree water temp. And yeah, it's 51, but still, I mean, blade baits work all year round, really. And I figured, well, it should work today. I mean, the water quality was a lot better when we went out. It was an algae stained green. It was only about 6-inch visibility, which doesn't sound like much, but compared to what Dan had to fish in, we did not have any mud. We were in northwest winds. And even though the winds at times were strong, we were protected most of the time, especially when we got down to Windmill Point. That was a very protected shoreline. We had no real issues with the wind until we started driving back and saw a little bit more wind on the way back, buffeting the boat. So anyway, I did have that one smallie follow the blade bait up to the boat, and he didn't commit. And I did throw the blade bait some more. It didn't do as well as I had hoped. Now we did end up on the flat that's north of Windmill Point. And we ended up concentrating on the seawalls. There's a reason for that. There may have been fish in a lot of different places on that flat, and it's a big flat too. But What's nice is you go to those natural barriers, and a lot of times the bass will respect those natural barriers. They're not going shore. But what I'm saying is that they will use those natural barriers as a highway. And that was certainly the case when we got there. Definitely the bite picked up. We caught a dozen or so, and the best one was 4 pounds, 6 ounces, which I was happy with. And we had enough over 3 pounds to keep the day interesting. It was we actually missed a lot of there were a lot of hits and misses on the baits that we were throwing, but the best bait, which is not a really big surprise, I always throw it this time of year, is a crayfish colored crankbait with a rattle. It's the only time I throw a crayfish colored crankbait on Lake St. Clair. So the water is clearing up. We didn't get well, the recent, yeah, no, we didn't get some satellite pictures this week that we normally get, but I do have a few to show you how the Walt Lake's been sort of gradually cleaning up. Now, the Belle Isle water temp, you'll find familiar, it's 51 degrees there as well. So let's take a look at the marine forecast for the weekend from NOAA. As we look at the forecast, you're going to see some north, you're going to see some northwest, even a northeast stuck in there too. But then you'll see some southwest winds coming along. And so you'll start to see it shift to the westerlies. Now, every spring, I look for a seasonal prevailing wind shift that, we've been getting east, 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 and eventually it'll shift to westerly winds. And that was something I've always kind of understood. Been out there for a while, and anybody who has, you kind of notice that sort of thing, especially since we only have the U.S. shoreline right now. If it's an east wind, we're kind of getting beat up. Well, as it turns out, this prevailing wind shift is a thing on the Great Lakes. I looked it up. And the Institute for Water Resources has identified two major periods for the prevailing winds on the Great Lakes. They call it fall and winter winds and spring and summer winds. And if you dig deep into that, you'll see the wind shift is kind of an east-west thing for them. Now, the University of Michigan calls it this way. They break it into winter and summer. And in the winter, they say there's a prevailing northwest wind, and in the summer, prevailing southwest wind. So they see it a little bit different. But on Lake St. Clair, the U.S. side gets the onshore wind when it blows from the east. It's kind of miserable, cold, and the bite is generally not as good as when the wind shifts to the west. Now, my version of the weather breaking in the spring is when the prevailing east winds give way to westerlies. I believe that happened with the northwest wind that we experienced on Thursday. At the time, I told my partner, I think this is the beginning of the wind shift. And if you look at the weather going forward, it certainly looks like it is transitioning to westerly winds as when you see those southwest winds in succession, one after another. I think we're in for a warming trend. And well, you know what that means. That means that the spawn is not too far away. Now, I also want to add for you this week, here's the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They do a forecast for the water levels. So I'd like to give you a little bit of a look at this. It's interesting. They're saying that the water levels are going to be the same as last year or probably a little bit lower than last year. And if you look at, I'll probably do a video later on this, but if you look at the long-term trends, we're in a downward trend. We were at super high levels, record levels in 2019, 2020, and we're on a downward trend now. It doesn't really matter how much rain or snow we get, it seems. Once you get on this downward trend, the whole watershed does that, and there will be a time when it'll be back on the upward trend. Don't mind the downward trend, actually. It exposes a lot of weed beds that we can't see in the high water, so it makes it very good for us bass anglers. We get to see a lot of the structure that's out in the middle of the lake, so I find it helpful myself. They update the chart monthly. You can get access to this chart yourself by going to my website, stclairreport.com. I've got some quick reference stuff on the top, and in that is the water levels chart and some other nice quick reference items that you'll probably want to have regular access to. Well, I do have, before we go, some breaking news, and it's not great. Effective today, which is May 1st, the EPA has issued a 20-day emergency waiver for the expansion of ethanol in fuel to combat the rising prices. Now, many organizations, including Mercury, have expressed concerns about outboard motors being at risk with ethanol blends exceeding the industry standard of 10%. There's more to know about this issue. I'm not totally convinced that we've got the whole picture. I spent a lot of time researching this, especially yesterday. Wanted to give you guys some clarity on this, and I don't have any clarity except if you go to stclairreport.com, I've got an article there that I wrote about this that'll give you a lot of detail that you don't have. And also it links to the Mercury article too. Mercury did a nice article on this too. And they're saying, yeah, this stuff's at risk. So take a look, stclairreport.com. There's the very top article right now is on the expansion of the ethanol standards temporary as it is. What they do a lot of times with these emergency extensions is they extend them. They emergency regulations, they'll extend them. They got a 20-day window and they may extend it for another 20 days, another 20 days throughout the summer. So we got to take a close look at this because we do love our boats. We don't want our engines to suffer because of this. So I'll keep you posted as more information comes in. So thanks a lot for viewing today. I hope the report enhances your St. Clair experience. Well, the bite is picking up. Have a blessed weekend.